Hey, what's up everybody? Time for another game theory video. Remember, if you like the videos, like, subscribe, comment, share, support the channel. If you can, I appreciate it. Thanks, Super Chat, PayPal, Patreon, whatever. Super likes help. If you want to do that, I appreciate it. Thanks. Today, I want to talk about the worst matchup in Street Fighter history. That's probably clickbait, but might be interesting. Let's do a little deep dive about RYU versus DHALSIM and how it is one of the most consistently bad matchups in Super Turbo, which is interesting because I've always said that Super Turbo is an amazing game that 30 years later that every character wins, even at the highest level. Even at the highest level, you see characters that are supposed to be countered by other characters just steamroll the other character, right? Look at, and this will be since we're talking about RYU, look at RYU versus E Honda. RYU is supposed to beat E Honda, obviously, right? But guess what? If you actually watch tournaments, it's not a uncommon occurrence to see E Honda just steamroll RYUs, right? Again, it's fascinating when you think about Super Turbo. But on the subject of Super Turbo and RYU, what is consistent even 30 years later is DHALSIM destroys RYU consistently. It is a consistently bad matchup that has not changed 30 years later. And I want to talk about this a little bit because it shows some bad balance, right? And as much as I love Super Turbo, it shows that the creators had perhaps a bit of a brain fart when they were thinking about tweaking RYU and DHALSIM in terms of this matchup specifically and how it became the clickbait worst matchup in Street Fighter history. Okay, so let's look at this for a second, right? Let's remember old RYU versus new RYU. So you might say that one interesting thing, a discrepancy that you could say is interesting between old RYU and new RYU is the different priority on some of their normals. Yes, I said priority, right? So let's look at a character like Guile. His neutral stand roundhouse is very strong versus old RYU. It beats his attacks cleanly, right? However, if it's new RYU, right? Let's watch this. Beats at this, but gotta remember, look at the roundhouse though. Do you see? Ooh, what a great freeze frame I got there, right? Guess what? It loses because new RYU, they changed the way his roundhouse works, that it has more priority. I'm going to keep saying priority just because I'm old, right? To beat, it has, or old RYU has more priority to beat attacks in front of him, air to air, whatever it might be. But he has a smaller hurt box, so now he beats attacks underneath him better, right? So this is a sort of specific matchup knowledge that is actually pretty interesting because new RYU actually jumps in on Guile much easier. If we were to just show this versus RYU, right? If we're doing old RYU versus new RYU, guess what? New RYU wins that exchange, right? Because of the way the hurt boxes and hitboxes collide with each other and vice versa, then new RYU would beat that, right? And of course, the trade-off though is that old RYU has this huge, very small hurt box on himself and he can beat dragon punches from certain ranges. And even if they went through them, right? However, I know this was a long forward. DHALSIM versus RYU. RYU's changes to the hurt boxes and hit boxes and speed of his normals did nothing for this matchup. And it just completely screwed him over, right? And I think from a certain perspective, this is why I say it's almost amazing how bad the matchup is, right? None of Super Turbo, as much as I love Super Turbo and I say it's so amazing that 30 years later that counter characters, that they still get beat by the character they're supposed to be countering, consistently, DHALSIM always beats RYU. It is very, very rare to see RYUs ever beat DHALSIMs at the highest level of play. It just is not consistent at all, right? So let's look at this, the DHALSIM versus RYU matchup for a second right here. Let's say we have this mid-screen range, right? And what happens at this mid-screen range when we're looking at some of these characters' tools versus each other, right? Well, if RYU does a fireball, DHALSIM has a slide. Okay, we can see that, right? Now, RYU does have some ideas to try to check, stuff like the slide, right? Like I can do a duck strong, duck medium punch, right? We also have, I can try to duck short it, right? Okay. And from this range, we can actually do a reaction hurricane kick if we see, right, the Yoga Flam. Now, let's look at how this changed in Super Turbo compared to old school Ryu, though, right? Let's take Super Ryu, right? Because Super Ryu has the better priority, faster speed on his footsies, right? So if we're playing footsies, I'm trying to zigzag, you know, like a little saw, move my way back in. Old Ryu, when he plays footsies, like I've made in these footsie videos, he checks other characters extremely well, right? So Ryu is getting into this sweet spot of the matchup, right? Where he wins, and guess what? I can now reaction Hurricane Kick to his Fireball. I can hear Yoga Flame, and you can react to a Hurricane Kick. Because remember, if it's not at this sweet spot, which again, I'm sure there's someone that has insane reactions they can, but generally speaking, if you're not at this sort of sweet spot, you have to guess with the Hurricane Kick. You can't really react to it, right? Now, let's see what happened, though, if we pick new Ryu, who you can see the priority, hitboxes and hitboxes on his normals and his slower speed. Guess what? Ryu can't consistently win as much. And trading a short with a fierce is obviously not a trade in Ryu's favor when you're trying to get in, right? Well, that's not a good trade for Ryu, right? Now, let's look at this. See, so what do I do right here? So see, if we're at a range now where the short will actually win more often, and this is why I was talking about the Hurricane Kick, guess what? If I react to the Yoga Flame, well, I had to guess. Because if I try to react to the Yoga Flame from that distance, you better hear Yoga immediately, right? To try to react to that, right? So I'm already getting kind of screwed on what was a sort of fundamental idea of this matchup since Championship Edition, right? Because remember, in the original Street Fighter, Ryu actually could not Hurricane Kick through DHALSIM's Fireball. God forbid, well, you know, DHALSIM and Guile, they destroy everyone in the game. And God, I mean, how many people even remember that there was a time that Ryu could not Hurricane Kick through a DHALSIM Fireball at all? Jesus, those were the dark days of old school Street Fighter, right? So let's look at this, right? So let's say we have this range where we're trying to get a little bit farther away, right? Again, DHALSIM can still slide. But at these further ranges, guess what? I can't check with the medium punch either, right? Let's see what I show here. Now, here's another thing to remember too about when we're going to Super Turbo, about how DHALSIM's footsies actually got better than the footsie character Ryu. And this is what I want to show here. People, again, if you're not old school, you might not remember. If you pick Super DHALSIM, right? It wasn't until Super Turbo that you could control your normals. So guess what? DHALSIM, if he's in this like really short, this sort of like jam-packed little range right here, guess what? He's going to keep getting slide. And guess what? DHALSIM doesn't have any normal that's going to beat me when I'm mashing on duck short like that, right? However, once we go to Super Turbo, DHALSIM can control his normals, and looks what happened, right? Well, let's say we're doing a medium punch, right? Well, medium punch isn't going to hit. Well, at least I still have a duck short. My duck short is still more powerful and is going to win that exchange, right? But guess what? DHALSIM also has ducking punch normals, right? So again, if we were to go before Super Turbo, guess what? Look at the ranges those come out, right? Ryu doesn't, that's not too much of a fear for Ryu, right? Because I'm just going to mash on duck short. I don't give a fuck, right? Oh, you pushed me out to the range where I can react to a Hurricane Kick? Not that bad, right? However, if we go to Super Turbo, well, guess what? Now I can do this normal right here, and this actually beats you what you do, right? You're like, oh, fuck, DHALSIM's, you know, checking me now. The character that I'm supposed to check, now we have to get in a check battle with my medium punch, right? And remember the duck medium punch, though, that's not going to actually hit if he does the lower punch. So now I'm in a guess, I'm being pushed out by this character that has all these other tools that I don't have, right? And I have to guess. Not good for Ryu, right? Again, if we show this right here, guess what? Well, Jesus Christ, that's not going to hit, right? And God forbid, I can't duck short. New Ryu's not even going to be able to duck short it because we're going to trade him. That's not a trade you want with your duck short, obviously, right? So again, look at this old school idea where we had the idea that Ryu could sort of zigzag, see like a saw his way in. Forward bomb, ducking short, playing footsies, and checking everything that DHALSIM did. And then guess what? You see a Yoga Flame, you can react to it from that distance, right? Now, With new Ryu, this doesn't really work because the ranges where you can zigzag in are extremely specific, right? And I can try to medium punch, right? Okay, I mean, I guess that'll beat Stand Fierce, right? Okay, I get it. I mean, look at that. It's not super consistent. I can try to duck short, but look, I'm almost full screen away. I'm almost full screen away when this actually wins a little bit more consistently. But guess what? If I try to medium punch, well, we know that doesn't work because that's not going to hit, right? We also know, just to show some other things about how screwed Ryu got in this matchup, right? If I'm duck shorting at this range, right, this actually beats DHALSIM's drills like that, right? But if I'm new Ryu, oh, I can't even beat the drill anymore because they put a hurt box on my foot. That sucks to be Ryu, in this matchup at least, right? Whereas in this, okay, so DHALSIM can do the other drill to try to hit it. And this is a little more theoretical. This is almost going to like Hyper Fighting Championship Edition where you could actually more slower. So you could actually react to this a little bit. You could actually react to the drill. So you could try to, again, a little bit more theoretical. You're checking him and then try to Hurricane Kick. But again, Hurricane Kick is invincible, once you get to these games. I mean, I suppose theoretically, if you had insane reaction, you could try to, but quite difficult, But I thought this was interesting because this shows, again, I just think it's interesting. 30 years later, I can watch a Super Turbo tournament and characters that are supposed to be counter characters, others, they get steamrolled. It's not weird to see low tier characters win in Super Turbo because there's that balance in the chaos and there's so many different powerful tools. But 30 years later, I mean, it's still very, very rare to see Ryus beat DHALSIM, right? It is one of the most consistently bad matchups in the history of the game, I think. It just, it goes to show you, like, when you see Ryu win, you see Ryu because they're hurricane kicking all over and they're just trying to guess, dragon punching everything, hoping that it works. Whereas before, there actually was, and this isn't to say that there's no strategy, because there is, of course, but, the tools that Ryu had, he could try, there were like tools for both characters to check each other, right? Whereas, and I know that every character has to be different, and that's why I tried to show this example at the beginning, because it shows that there's an interesting dynamic of old Ryu versus new Ryu in terms of what you can jump in on. And it's like a matchup sort of knowledge, right? So the jump in normals being different is interesting. But when you see how Footsies actually works for Ryu, specifically, and especially versus DHALSIM, you're like, whoa, this is not good. Why is DHALSIM beating Ryu in these Footsie sort of matchups, right? It should not be happening. And I know Ryu's got to be different than, new and old Ryu got to be different, but it's a little too far. I don't think, even when I think about if I was to balance like Super Turbo or something like that, I can't think of any matchup that just becomes so retardedly or something in favor for Ryu if you would have kept new Ryu having the same sort of footsie tools or something like that. And it only helps Ryu a little bit in some of his bad matchups, like say Vega versus Ryu is a bad matchup. But that's another idea of a bad matchup, I think, that you still see Ryu's beat Vega. There are still like tools to check Vega and everything like that. But DHALSIM versus Ryu, just consistently bad, and I think it shows a little bit of a brain fart if you think about it. Anyway, if you like the videos, like, sub, silly, comment, share, support the channel if you can. I appreciate it. Thanks. The end.